Okay, here's a very quick overview of the subjunctive. In class we talked about the morphology, and for the present subjunctive, you simply change the theme vowel to indicate subjunctive. E for the first conjugation, some form of A for the second conjugation. We had a mnemonic, we fear a liar, for the four conjugations. Remember third IO as often. We observed the fact that there's some possibility for confusion, but we also realized that if we keep the type of verb we're dealing with very clear in our minds, then we'll know what to expect the present indicative, we'll know what to expect the future, we'll know what to expect the present subjunctive, and it really won't cause us that much difficulty. Now, the morphology of the imperfect subjunctive is unusually easy, and it's found on page 129 in the back of the book. And you'll see, or we saw already, that it's just simply the infinitive with personal endings. That's it. Very, very simple. And those are all of the tenses that we're learning in this chapter of the subjunctive. That's the present subjunctive and the imperfect subjunctive. Now, how do you use them? How do you translate them? You'll notice that the charts don't include a formulaic translation the way they did way back in Latin 1 when we learned the present indicative. And that's because there's no real just formulaic translation that you can plug in. It depends completely on how it's used, on the type of construction, on the type of sentence. We're only learning two uses in this chapter. The first one is found on page 128, and that is the Jussive subjunctive, so-called Jussive subjunctive. And it's very simple. It's a present subjunctive, and this is very important, in a main clause, not in a subordinate clause. For instance, it's not a subjunctive after ut. It's just a subjunctive in a main clause. We translate it as let us. Famous example of two Jussive subjunctives are the opening line of the poet poem. Vivamos mea lesbia atque amemos. Notice that that first verb had an A even though it was third conjugation. The second verb had an E even though it was first conjugation. That should let you know right away that it's present subjunctive. Both of those verbs are in the main clause. Neither are followed by ut. Therefore, you translate them as let us. Let us live, my lesbia, and so let us love. Now, what about the other usage of the subjunctive that we're learning in this chapter? Purpose clauses. If we turn to page 129, we'll see some examples in exercise 34.4 and then again 34.5. Purpose clauses are the first in a series of ut plus subjunctive clauses that we're going to be learning in the next few chapters. Easy enough to identify. You see the word ut, you see a subjunctive verb following it, it's an ut plus subjunctive clause. But how do you translate it is the key. Well, with these that we're learning now, the purpose clauses, first we'll discuss how to translate the purpose clauses when it's ut plus present subjunctive. Ut plus present subjunctive. And those are 34.4. Here, I'll give you the formulaic translation in order that we may, or in order that he, she, it may, whatever the personal ending is. In order that may, and that's ut plus the subjunctive. There's also the negative of that, which is nay plus the subjunctive, and that I say translated as in order that we may not. The book suggests lest we, but I think that's still good. I prefer you say in order that we may not. So let's look at an example in number 1. Festinamos. We are hurrying. It's just a regular present indicative, right? You recognize it from the A, because it's festinar, right? That's not a subjunctive. Festinamos. We are hurrying. Ut te adiuemos. Is ut plus subjunctive. Ut followed by adiuemos. Well, you know adiuare is first conjugation. By golly, we have an E, so it must be subjunctive. There it is. Do you see? You're expecting A for present indicative. You get an E. It's present subjunctive. And it's also very easy to recognize this as an ut plus subjunctive. Since we're learning purpose clauses, we also know it's a purpose clause. Plug in our formulaic translation, and what do we get? We are hurrying in order that we may help you. We are hurrying in order that we may help you. Now, let me add here that I want you to translate it that way, for class purposes, for quiz purposes. But I also want you to be able to put that into kind of more normal, more natural English, and that would probably be the following. Listen, we are hurrying to help you. Sounds like an infinitive, but the Latin here uses ut plus subjunctive. So if you follow the Latin more closely, it says we are hurrying in order that we may help you. That's what I want you to say on the quizzes and tests. But I also want you to be aware of the fact that much more natural English is we are hurrying to help you. And in fact, I would prefer that you translate it both ways. Maybe in good English first, and then in parentheses in that goofy, literal, following the Latin very closely way, in order that we may help you. Now let's skip down to number 6 so that we get a negative, one with may. Pueriad ludum festinant. Again, look at that, a regular verb, festinare, first conjugation, I have an A. I don't have a subjunctive here. The boys are hurrying to school. What's the rest of the sentence? Ne sero adveniant. Ne sero adveniant. Here, however, advenire, I would have expected adveniunt if it were present indicative, but I get adveniant, I-A-N-T. Here's a little secret. I-A-N-T is automatically present subjunctive, very easy to recognize. So, again, I have ne plus subjunctive. Plug in my formulaic translation. In order that they may not arrive late. In order that they may not arrive late. So the whole sentence is the boys are hurrying to school in order that they may not arrive late. Again, that's following the Latin very closely. I would prefer you do that in parentheses. For now. Eventually, I'm not going to ask you to translate literally at all. But I want you to do it now while we're learning it. However, I want you to also be able to translate into good English, which is going to be something like, the boys are hurrying to school to not arrive late, or not to arrive late, or something. Okay, let me point out now that both of the ut plus subjunctive clauses we saw had a present subjunctive in them, or actually the ut and the ne plus subjunctive clauses that we just saw. Both had present subjunctive, and that's because they follow the main clauses that were present tense, present time. That's called primary sequence. We'll learn that later. But for now, I want you to realize that if the main clause is present tense or future, we'll learn that later, the ut clause is going to contain the present subjunctive, and we're going to translate it as we just did, in order that they may. Now, what about the imperfect subjunctive that we learned the morphology for? Well, by golly, those are also used in purpose clauses, but they follow some kind of past tense main clause. Or to say it slightly differently, if the verb of the main clause rather, is some kind of past tense, really any kind of past tense, and we can talk about that more later, then the ut plus subjunctive is going to be imperfect. And there's an example in sentence 1 on page on 34.5. However, before we translate it, our formulaic translation is going to vary slightly. Instead of translating as we did with the present subjunctive as in order that we may, or in order that he or they may, we're going to translate it as in order that we might. And of course, may again would be in order that we might not. So let's try it. Festinabamos. Aha, some kind of past tense. We were hurrying. Utque adiuaremos. And take a look at that verb, adiuaremos. Put your thumb over the mus, and what do you have? By golly, you have an infinitive. So by golly, you're dealing with an imperfect subjunctive, as we saw on the whiteboard today. So let's plug in the formulaic translation for ut plus imperfect subjunctive. We were hurrying in order that we might help you. We were hurrying in order that we might help you. Once again, though, I want you to be able to translate it into good English as well. And, oh, look at this. It's going to be the same as the present subjunctive at top. We were hurrying to help you. We were hurrying to help you. Again, be prepared to translate it both ways on quizzes and tests. Eventually, actually very soon, we'll dispense with the literal translation. And let's just quickly look at a negative one with ne, number 6 in 34.5. Query ad ludum festinabant, ne servo advenirent. Again, you were to cover that last T in that sentence, last NT in that sentence, you'd see, oh, that's an infinitive with the personal ending. It's imperfect subjunctive. Plug in formulaic translation for ut or ne plus imperfect subjunctive, and we get the boys were hurrying to school in order that they might not arrive late. In order that they might not arrive late. Again, we prepared also to translate literally. The boys were hurrying to school in order to not arrive late or not to arrive. Okay.